Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Shri Radhe Jaya Jagannath Jaya Jagannath Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Gauranitai Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Ciao Mukshapad Paramahamsa Parivraj Acharya Structura Shabda Shishimani Stivangesh Laisi Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Shri Jai Narayani, unser neuer Pujari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 So we continue reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 4, chapter 29, text 54 and 54, huh?
Yes.
So you wrote down the verse?
No.
Yeah. This is, I think it's called prose or something. So I will just read it without repetition. Sumana samadharmanam strinam sharana ashrame pushpa madhu gandhavat kshudratamam kamya karma vipakajam kama sukalavam chai vyau pastyati vichinvantam mituni puya tat abhiniveshita manasam shadangri kana sama gitavat attimanohara vanitadi chanalapesh atitaram atipralobitar karnam agre vrikka yutavat atma ayur harato ho ratran tan kala lava trisheshan aviganaya griheshu viharantam prishtata eva paroksham anupravritto luptaka kritantunta sharenayam iha paravidyati tam imam atmanam aho rajam binna hridayam drashtum arhasiti. Word for word. It's a long purport also, and it's a hot topic, so maybe better we just read everything and then we don't have to say so much. Let's not do word for word. Let's just read the translation. My dear king, woman who is very attractive in the beginning, but in the end very disturbing, is exactly like the flower, which is attractive in the beginning and detestable at the end. With woman, the living entity is entangled with lusty desires, and he enjoys sex just as one enjoys aroma of a flower. He thus enjoys a life of sense gratification from his tongue to his genitals. And in this way the living entity considers himself very happy in family life. United with his wife, he always remains absorbed in such thoughts. He feels great pleasure in hearing the talks of his wife and children, which are like the sweet humming of bumblebees that collect honey from flower to flower. He forgets that before him is time, which is taking away his lifespan with the passing of day and night. He does not see the gradual diminishing of his life, nor does he care about the superintendent of death, who is trying to kill him from behind. Just try to understand this. You are in a precarious position and are threatened from all sides. Prabhupada. Materialistic life means forgetting one's constitutional position as the eternal servant of Krishna. And this forgetfulness is especially enhanced in the Grihastha ashram. In the Grihastha ashram, a young man accepts a young wife who is very beautiful in the beginning, but in due course of time, after giving birth to many children and becoming older and older, she demands many things from the husband to maintain the entire family. At such a time, the wife becomes detestable to the very man who accepted her in her younger days. One becomes attached to the Grihastha ashram for two reasons only. The wife cooks palatable dishes for the satisfaction of her husband's tongue, and she gives him sexual pleasure at night. A person attached to the Grihastha ashram is always thinking of these two things, palatable food and sex enjoyment. The talks of the wife, which are enjoyed as a family recreation, and the talks of the children both attract the living entity. He thus forgets that he has to die someday and has to prepare for the next life if he wants to be put into a congenial body. The deer in the flower garden is an allegory used by the great sage Narada to point out to the king that the king himself is similarly entrapped by such surroundings. Actually, everyone is surrounded by such a family life which misleads one. The living entity thus forgets that he has to return home back to Godhead. He simply becomes entangled in family life. Prahlad Maharaj has therefore hinted, Hitvatma patam griham andakupam vanam gato yat tarim ashrayata. Family life is considered a blind well, andakupam, into which a person falls and dies without help. Prahlad Maharaj recommends that while one's senses are there and one is strong enough, he should abandon the Grihastha ashram and take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, going to the forest of Vrindavan. According to Vedic civilization, one has to give up family life at a certain age, the age of 50, take vanaprastha, and eventually remain alone as a sannyasi. That is the prescribed method of Vedic civilization known as Varnashram Dharma. When one takes sannyas after enjoying family life, he pleases the Supreme Lord Vishnu. One has to understand one's position in family or worldly life. That is called intelligence. One should not remain always trapped in family life to satisfy his tongue and genitals in association with a wife. In such a way, one simply spoils his life. According to Vedic civilization, it is imperative to give up the family at a certain stage, by force if necessary. Unfortunately, so-called followers of Vedic life do not give up their family even at the end of life, unless they are forced by death. There should be a thorough overhauling of the social system, and society should revert to the Vedic principles, that is, the 4 varnas and the 4 ashramas. Umagyana timirandasya gyananjana shalakaya chakshuru militam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya manobishtam stapitam yena bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Harijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhamritamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sudhya Devi Pranamami Hari Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubheva Cha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namo Vishnupadaya, Krishna Prestaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasyatya Shatarini. One more time the translation. My dear king, woman who is very attractive in the beginning but in the end very disturbing is exactly like the flower which is attractive in the beginning and detestable at the end. With woman, the living entity is entangled with lusty desires and he enjoys sex, just as one enjoys the aroma of a flower. He thus enjoys a life of sense gratification, from his tongue to his genitals, and in this way the living entity considers himself very happy in family life. United with his wife, he always remains absorbed in such thoughts. He feels great pleasure in hearing the talks of his wife and children, which are like the sweet humming of bumblebees that collect honey from flower to flower. He forgets that before him is time, which is taking away his lifespan with the passing of day and night. He does not see the gradual diminishing of his life, nor does he care about the superintendent of death, who is trying to kill him from behind. Just try to understand this. You are in a precarious position and are threatened from all sides. Hare Krishna. So, I guess This is a purport, the verse which, especially the purport as well, by Srila Prabhupada, which reminds us that Krishna consciousness is something serious. It's not something to be taken lightly. And Srila Prabhupada, as a true sadhu, is cutting our illusion by speaking very strong words. And he's trying, with his strong words, he's trying to destroy the very essence of material existence, which is sense gratification, and which ultimately is the attraction between man and woman. So Srila Prabhupada speaks strongly, like following in the footsteps of other Mahajans, Acharyas, like Prahlad Maharaj, who he quotes, who has said that Grihastha Ashram is like a blind well. So we can try to open our mind and heart to Srila Prabhupada's Vani, even though it sometimes feels a little bit uncomfortable because we are attached. We want to enjoy it, and now we hear such devastating words. But if we are sincerely coming to Srimad Bhagavatam class and trying to understand what the pure devotees want to say to us, what Krishna wants to say, there is a chance that our heart can actually experience some transformation. So, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying that Aham sarvasya prabhavo matas Aham sarvasya prabhavo matas sarva pravartate. That he is the source of everything, he is the cause of everything, everything emanates from him. And this is the very essence of the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, that Krishna is the ultimate, absolute truth, for which we are actually hankering in this relative world. Everything we try to enjoy, it is just a product of Krishna. And that by understanding this, by actually coming to that realization in one's heart, one becomes a pure devotee of the Lord. And one becomes free from material existence. In another verse in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Bahunam Jalmanamante Kyanavan Mam Prabhadyante Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabhaha. And Krishna is basically saying in that verse that Bahunam Jalmanamante, it's not happening in one lifetime. It's happening over many, many lifetimes. To come to that point, it happens over many, many lifetimes. And that is something important to understand, that we try to go back home in this lifetime, we try to reach perfection, but actually the process is taken over many lifetimes. And the fact that we are here today means we have been doing something in our previous life. We have some pious credit in our bank account, spiritual bank account. So Bhavanam Chamanamante Gyanavam Prabhadyante means Krishna consciousness is a gradual development. It's a progressive cultivation. And Krishna gave Varnashram Dharma in order to facilitate that cultivation. That's his arrangement for humanity. So Krishna is not, he's not a very small, narrow-minded person. He's a very broad-minded person. Udaradi, which means broad-minded. he's very broad-minded, Krishna, meaning he's always thinking in a big scale. So when he thinks about how to liberate his parts and parcels who are fallen in the material world, he doesn't just think about 1, 2 or 3. No, he thinks about everyone. And he creates a system which is perfect for each and everyone. Because he wants that every living entity goes back home, back to Godhead, not just some strange hippie who decided to join the Hare Krishna movement at the Bergstrasse 54 in Zurich and shave up and wear saffron robes. Krishna is not like that. He's not fanatic. He's very broad-minded. He wants everyone to go back home, back to Godhead, and he wants that everyone can make progress at each stage of existence. If a living entity is very conditioned, for Krishna that's not a disqualification to make spiritual progress. No, even the animals, even the plants should be involved in that process of self-realization. And so he's creating this wonderful Varnashram Dharma, which, when we come in contact with this, and we hear Chaturvarnyam Maya Srishtam, Guna Karma Vibhaga Shaha, and so on, and we hear the statements, we actually don't understand what it means. Because it's so simple, it looks so simple, that we don't understand how deep it is, how perfect this system is. How complex this system is as well, how all the living entities are actually intertwined, are connected, and ultimately connected in one purpose. And Prabhupada often used to give that example. It's like a body with different limbs, the head, the arms, the legs, the belly, and all living entities are connected to that body. And what is the body meant to do? To serve Krishna, to please Krishna. A wonderful system. So that is the underlying understanding of Varnashram Dharma that is created by the Lord Himself, and it is the only way how humanity can make spiritual progress in a large scale. Actually, in the scriptures we hear and understand we don't need Varnashram Dharma to become Krishna conscious. It's not needed. Actually, it doesn't make you Krishna conscious. That's what makes us Krishna conscious?
Bhakti Yoga.
Bhakti Yoga, devotional service. So then, why? It's a conflict, no? Isn't it a conflict? No? Why not?
Because Bhakti Yoga is a process, and Varnashram Dharma is just those who would help you to follow this process.
Yes, it supports the process. Or it brings you to the stage where you can actually start the process. If we look historically in our tradition, there was a time, some 100 years ago, when for the Vaishnavas, Varnashram was actually kind of to be rejected. According to the understanding that Varnashram Dharma is materialistic. So there was a time, a few hundred years ago, when the Vaishnavas, that time in India, the real Vaishnavas, they were all Babajis, meaning they left the Grihastha, they left the Varnashram Dharma. But then we see how our acharyas, Bhaktivinoda, especially starting from Bhaktivinoda Thakur onwards, and following Bhaktisiddhanta and Srila Prabhupada, they either preached about Varnashram Dharma or they actively established Varnashram Dharma. Especially Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was the one who took up the idea of his father Bhaktivinoda Thakur and established it practically in Gaudiya Math. He established Varnashram Dharma. He established sannyas. Before Bhaktisiddhanta taking sannyas, there was no sannyasis in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. I mean, we know Mahaprabhu took sannyas and so on, but for many, many hundreds of years there was no sannyas in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. And Bhaktisiddhanta gave himself sannyas and introduced all the other ashrams. He introduced Brahmachari ashram, introduced Grihastha, Vanaprastha. And Srila Prabhupada, he himself even, he went one step further. What did he do? He as a sannyasi sat down and made a fire yagya to marry his disciples, which is unheard of in Vedic culture, that the sannyasi who renounces Grihastha ashram promotes Grihastha ashram. And this shows that actually the activities of a pure devotee are very deep and very difficult to understand. But we know the whole motivation was to establish Krishna consciousness on a worldwide basis. That was the desire of Mahaprabhu, and the acharyas came to fulfill that desire, and they used their intelligence to do that, and they did it according to Krishna's will, because they knew if we want to have a worldwide movement of Krishna consciousness, it has to be based on Varnashram Dharma, because that's the way Krishna gave. It's very similar maybe also to the point of when we read from Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, we can hear that actually if you want to go to Goloka Vrindavan, if you want to become Brajavasi, you have to practice Raga Ruga Bhakti. Sadhana Bhakti Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti will not lead you to Goloka Vrindavan. But it was also Bhaktisiddhanta who established Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. And that is actually there's a lot of controversy about this from other Vaishnavas, that they say, how come he is disregarding our Sampradaya Acharya Rupa Goswami? They see it as a disagreement, as a contradiction. But that's the power of an Acharya. He can establish something in order to bring people to Krishna consciousness, because they also have the same goal. They want to bring everyone to the lotus feet of Krishna in Vrindavan. But they are very expert in knowing how to do that. So that's why these things were done. Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti was established, and also Varnashram Dharma. So Varnashram Dharma, that's a little bit the background and why we're speaking about this. We're speaking about Grihastha ashram especially, and I think something which is also quite natural if we hear this kind of purports, and it's something which we might not be very familiar with, some emotional reaction will happen within us. If we hear about the topic of the woman and the family life is just like a dark well, it's actually almost natural that some emotions will come up because of our value system. For many, many years in our life we put all our investment of values in that concept of life, to become happy in the relationship between man and woman. So now when we hear this, something happens often emotionally, and it's very important to look at it with a sober mind. And one thing which I find comes because what can happen emotionally two things. One thing is I accept or I reject. No, that's the mind. And if it's based on emotions, what tends to happen is that I reject based on emotions, or I accept based on emotions, meaning I'm being over-attached or over-detached from it. So then you have the brahmacharis who are very fanatic, who say Grihastha ashram is just, and then you have the others, those who never went into the brahmacharya ashram, who say, you know, the brahmacharya, that's just complete fanaticism. And so how to balance it? That's the balance. Prabhupada in his purport gives the balance. The balance means Grihastha ashram is good, but you leave it at a certain point. And this is something also Devaki Mataji speaks a lot about. It's not very well established and understood in ISKCON. And Prabhupada, that's why I was saying, Srila Prabhupada, as a sadhu, he comes and really cuts through our illusion. I'm going to read again what he says here. According to Vedic civilization, it is imperative to give up the family at a certain stage, by force if necessary. Strong statement. Imperative means you have to do it. It's not a question if you want to or you don't want to. And then on top of that, even if it's difficult, you have to force yourself to do it. And basically that's the balanced understanding that, and maybe we should philosophically back it up, try to pack it in these few minutes. Why this is actually the balanced and mature approach, that you accept Grihastha ashram. I'm not saying as a general thing that everybody has to, but in general that's the fact, no, that most people go through the Grihastha ashram. So let's say that's the standard, but the standard is also to leave it again. And why Grihastha ashram is so important is because, we heard about Varnashram Dharma being the system of gradually cultivating Krishna consciousness. Bahunam chamanamante, jnanamam prapatante. It's something which is not happening overnight. And Srila Prabhupada, in the Nectar of Devotion, he explains about this cultivation of Krishna consciousness, which is he makes some very good points there. I'm going to read from the introduction. This devotional service is a sort of cultivation. It is not simply inaction for people who like to be inactive or devote their time to silent meditation. There are many different methods for people who want this, but cultivation of Krishna consciousness is different. The particular word used by Srila Rupa Goswami in this connection is anushilana, or cultivation by following the predecessor teachers, acharyas. As soon as we say cultivation, we must refer to activity. Without activity, consciousness alone cannot help us. All activities may be divided into two classes. One class may be for achieving a certain goal, and the other may be for avoiding some unfavorable circumstance. In Sanskrit, these activities are called pravritti and nivritti, positive and negative action. There are many examples of negative action. For instance, a diseased person has to be cautious and take medicine in order to avoid some unfavorable illness. Those who are cultivating spiritual life and executing devotional service are always engaged in activity. Such activity can be performed with the body or with the mind. Thinking, feeling and willing are all activities of the mind, and when we will to do something, the activity comes to be manifest by the gross bodily senses. Thus, in our mental activities, we should always try to think of Krishna and try to plan how to please Him. following in the footsteps of the great acharyas and the personal spiritual master. So I wanted to read this because, to get this very important but logical understanding that it's a cultivation, it's confirmed by Krishna and Bhagavad Gita, it's a cultivation over some period of time. And Prabhupada is clearly saying it's based on activity. And this is also, we find the hints in the Bhagavad Gita itself, why this activity is so important. Here is one verse, there's many similar verses, but that's one in Bhagavad Gita 3:5. Nahi kashit kshanamapi jatu tishtyat akarma krit karyate yavasha karma sarva prakriti jaya gunahi. Everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. This we hear again and again in the Bhagavad Gita, which is also, I think it's very difficult for us to really understand, because we don't obviously see how we are not the doer. We think we are actually acting, but because we are so close with our conditioning, but actually it's the gunas. We hear it again and again. And we hear how the conditioned soul is acting, and we heard from Srila Prabhupada that actually every action is based on the mind. Because only if I go through the process of thinking, feeling and willing, the willing will produce an action. So we can conclude that our conditioning is mainly based on the mind. And then in the next verse, which is a famous one, Krishna says, Indriyartam vimudatma mityachara sauchyate. One who restrains the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. The mind is the central. The mind is the center of all activities, and so. Jai Jagannath Baladev Sudhadeva Thank you, Jai. The mind is the center of all activities, and the mind is also, Prabhupada explains, it's the center of the yoga system. It's the mind which basically our consciousness is most influenced by. And Krishna himself says, Manmana Bhavamat Bhakto, he says twice that you should think of me, you should use your mind to think of me. But how to do it? That's maybe the tricky part, and we have a whole philosophy behind, a whole culture, a whole tradition. Basically, we try to take guidance from the self-realized souls, but what do they do? The principle is a very simple one, and it's also confirmed by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me, and your mind intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. That we are forced to act in a certain way, so we have to do this. But by doing it properly for the satisfaction of Krishna, we actually get the ability to think of him. And we can cultivate Krishna consciousness. So, because most of the human beings have this desire for relationship and family life and sense gratification, then they will have to dovetail this with Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada mentioned how there is always two kinds of activities. One is positive and one is negative. And one is trying to proactively connect with Krishna, and the other one is just to prevent that we get disconnected from Krishna. And this kind of disconnection from Krishna, it comes. What is disconnecting us from Krishna? What is the disconnecting force? What is, maybe you remember if I ask like this, Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, what is covering us? What is covering the pure living entity? Lust, yeah. Exactly, it's lust. And Krishna gives few verses, he speaks very nicely how lust is actually, he says, Jnanam avritya dehinam, that the senses, the mind and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. And then he advises, Tasmatvam indriyanyado niyamya bharatarshava. Therefore, Arjuna, O best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning curbed this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. It's again, I'm bringing this up in connection with this Grihastha Ashram topic, because the Grihastha Ashram is exactly this kind of ashram where you very consciously regulate yourself in order to, Prabhupada uses the word to curb lust. He doesn't say to destroy, but to curb lust, meaning to kind of put it into, you kind of protect it, and then by protecting it, it will not increase, and then you can actually work with it and slowly decrease it. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport he makes a very profound statement. Because the verse says, Jnana Vijnana Nashanam, that karma is Jnana Vijnana Nashanam. Nashanam means destroy, and Jnana and Vijnana, knowledge and realized knowledge. Prabhupada, he explains, the Lord advises Arjuna to regulate the senses from the very beginning, so that he could curb the greatest sinful enemy, lust, which destroys the urge for self-realization, which is jnana, and specific knowledge of the self, vijnana. And the Grihastha Ashram is meant for this. There's no other purpose. It is meant to give the conditioned living entity the facility to, in a constructive way, engage lust, so that lust is not covering again the living entity. And if this is done properly, the lust is actually decreasing, and at some point the living entity will come to the conclusion, now I have to leave this place again, and I have to move forward and accept Vanaprastha Sannyas. And Prabhupada says it's a must, you have to do it. Even Srila Prabhupada himself did it. Mahaprabhu also did it. Mahaprabhu did it when he was 24 years old. And his wife was actually a young girl. And why? Because to give the example how Krishna consciousness is way beyond all kinds of mundane good and bad. Because from a maybe mundane perspective, this looks to be a little bit strange and cruel. But seeing Mahaprabhu's life, he was showing us that in order to attain Krishna consciousness, you can even go so far as to renounce your family, your young wife. But here it has to be mentioned that the timing is very important, and again speaking about Varnashram Dharma, there is a very clear timing line. Usually it's recommended till 25, one is a brahmachari, and then 25 years grihastha, and after that vanaprastha sannyas. So, of course, Mahaprabhu, 24, he took sannyas. Why? Because he's a different person, and it is very individual. And it is based on, that's the main point to consider, it's based on our own mind, our own mental condition. If my mind is hankering for sense gratification and material enjoyment, Prabhupada says clearly, you shouldn't take sannyas. It's actually, it's a big mistake. You have to be fixed. So it's individual, and for some it's very early. I know in the Udupi Madhva Sampradaya, they sometimes, I think, give sannyas to 7-8-year-old by looking at their horoscope, and they say, oh, that's the sannyas, let's give him sannyas. And in ISKCON we have a little bit of different standard. Usually it's 50 plus. Mahaprabhu took with 24. So it's an individual process, but we can understand, again, the goal is for everyone the same. Everyone should come to that point in life, that one can fully renounce everything and surrender to Krishna directly, engaging fully in direct service. So to end this lecture, Prabhupada, the major point in this verse, in this purport, is that the Grihastha ashram should be left behind at a certain point, and Prabhupada says this can only be done. I can read to you again in the purport. Prabhupada says, one has to understand one's position in family or worldly life. That is called intelligence. So one needs intelligence, and we heard how intelligence means knowledge, either theoretically or better practically. And it's lust which is covering that intelligence, and that lust, it's a great art to control the lust, to transform the lust, and this has to be done under the guidance of a qualified teacher who knows the art. And in this way our intelligence can not only be protected, but it can actually become stronger and stronger, so strong that we can completely cut that bond of material attachment to family life. And this is only possible if we go through the Varnashram Dharma institution. We know that the basis of it is Brahmacharya ashram. Narada Muni describes what is Brahmacharya in the Bhagavatam, Brahmacharya Gurukule, that as a young boy one should go to the place of the teacher, and just for, traditionally it's done for 20 years, develop Krishna consciousness, and then one is actually qualified to enter the Grihastha ashram and eventually go out again. And one example I was thinking of, and then I will finish, most probably this whole Varnashram stages, it can be compared a little bit to the eating process. We also hear that Prabhupada once mentioned, actually our aim is to completely give up eating, sleeping, mating and defending, to make it zero. Which is, and he showed it, no, Prabhupada didn't eat anymore. But now, eating, we all have to eat. You cannot just not eat, you have to eat. But in eating also, it's a whole process. It starts from understanding what you should eat, how to prepare the food, then how you take the food, and that will then determine how you digest the food, and eventually how you, again, let it go. And Varnashram Dharma is a similar process, that you build up as a brahmachari some strong foundation, some strong understanding, so that when you enter into the grihastha, when you start eating and digesting, actually in the end it will come out nicely, and you will not have any disease in the end. But for this you need the understanding what is good for me, and somebody has to guide, and then you need to know the process. And Prabhupada also, if we find statements in the purport, if this is done properly, as if usually the eating process for most of the people becomes the cause of death, because of eating wrong, the wrong things and in the wrong way. But if it's done correctly, eating can also be the source of giving life. But this is, for most people, it's not possible because we cannot control ourselves. So Prabhupada explains also the Grihastha ashram, it can actually give the living entity strength and realization and Krishna consciousness, but it has to be done properly. And one has to, how do you say it when you leave the foodstuffs behind? There is a nice word for that. You have to, when you pass stool, basically. So that's the essence of that purport. One has to again leave the Grihastha ashram and renounce. Hare Krishna. Thank you. So I'm a little bit over time. We can end here and wish you a nice day. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ramtaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Mm.